All right. So welcome everybody to our book club series. My name is Matt Hardy. I'm the program director for planning and performance management here at AASHTO. To all of you joining us on the line, welcome. This is something new in our long-running sort of partnership between FHWA and AASHTO in the world of TAM webinar series. So after 50 webinars, we decided to change things up a little bit, and we're launching an 8-part book club for the new AASHTO TAM Guide. That guide is available at tamguide.com, as well as from the AASHTO bookstore. One's free, one's not, but if you're from a state DOT, you can get both free. Now we'll be delivering these book club meetings more frequently in order to sort of build momentum and increase engagement of the state DOTs and the transportation agencies in general, because this session is not just about the states, it's about transportation agencies, owners and operators in general. The next installment of the book club is going to be held next Wednesday, April 28th, also at 2 p.m. Eastern. So we have the series kind of scheduled over the next, I would say, 8 weeks, 8 or 9 weeks, kind of moved around a little bit slightly, but in general, they're going to happen on Wednesdays. The topic for today is on improving TAMP implementation and integration. If you want to register for that meeting or catch up on any of the past webinars, you can visit the wonderful TAM portal at tam-portal.com. Click on TAM webinars under events in the main menu. You can register for all the upcoming book club meetings and for future TAM webinars as they are announced at the website. So please, again, tam-portal.com. We've talked about in previous webinars and meetings that we have updated it, so it has a new interface and some slightly new sort of functionality. And we also have at the website all of the previous recorded and archived webinars. I was looking at it. It goes all the way back to webinar, I think, number 1 that we did a number of years ago, and it's very interesting to kind of see yourself from about 10 years ago. Links to and the video and slides from today's meeting will also be posted on the site, so look for that, not immediately following, but in the next day or so. Finally, if you have questions at all during today's webinar, please use the Zoom meetings chat feature. We'll be monitoring that. We can answer questions via chat, or if we need to have sort of somebody talk about the answer, we can do that as well. We'll have time for discussion towards the end of the session today. So again, welcome. Now I want to turn it over to my good friend, colleague Steve Gay, who's from our co-sponsor of this, the Federal Highway Administration. So Steve, it's all yours.
Thank you there, Matt. Federal Highway is a proud sponsor of this special TAM Guide Book Club in a TAM webinar series in cooperation with AASHTO. One of the ideas behind having this webinar series is, a lot of effort went into putting this guide together. With some of your state colleagues, etc. I think it's a great opportunity to get familiar with it and use it as you're developing your next that is due no later than 2022.
Home with COVID.
The series is first and foremost an opportunity to share practical, useful, timely information with the asset management community. And we hope this interactive format will really help support these goals. I know we're going to try something a little new today. I'm glad to see so many of you from the regular TAM webinar series. We have a great program for today's session, the first of 8 we have on the calendar. We're here today for practitioners who are using the TAM Guide to support strong asset management practice. And you get a chance to explore the guide in small groups. I think you're going to enjoy today's session and hope to learn a lot this afternoon. I'm looking forward to it. The TAM Guide is a valuable resource for agencies starting to develop their next TAMP. This series is designed to focus on the areas where agencies will derive the greatest benefit. Life cycle planning and management, financial planning, risk and resiliency, and more. And as Matt mentioned, the topic of next week's book club is improving TAMP implementation integration. This is an area where the results of our TAMP review gap analysis project highlighted as an important one. You know, going back quite a few years now, I believe it was in Colorado DOT. Internally, they started this book club. Maybe it's an idea for some of you all, asset management leads and others. Bring together the pavement, bridge, planning districts over the guide, building from this webinar series. I'm really looking forward to it. And I'm passing on to Yana Park from Spy Pond Partners and Katie Zimmerman of AP Tech. Did you hear me at all, Yana?
Yes, you were on for most of it, and it was the last sentence we missed.
Hey, turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Steve. All right, welcome everyone as we embark on this 8-part webinar mini-series, and we're testing out some new elements of a webinar, and we're going to have breakout groups in this session. So bear with us because this is our first time, which is why we're using Zoom, because breakouts are much easier to do in Zoom than in GoToWebinar. So let me go over the agenda with you. We had Matt and Steve give us a welcome and introduction. Katie and I are going to do a quick topic introduction and some Menti polls. So I think at the beginning of the slides, if you downloaded the Menti poll link is available there, and I think it's in the handout if you look at that. And then we're going to have very quick use cases where we have 3 state DOTs, Connecticut, New Mexico, and Colorado, who will share either what they have used the TAM guide for or are planned to use, just to illustrate the connection to an agency and how they're going to get value from the TAM guide. But most of the time we'll be spending today, we're gonna be in a breakout session where we'll have a quest. And so we'll be looking for a set of quests. We're gonna have a little bit of a competition, but today's topic is how can you use the TAM guide to help you with the 2022 TAMP development. And so think of this one as kind of the introductory webinar where we'll touch upon topics at a high level. And then all of the other webinars, we're going to dive in much more deeply into each individual topic. Okay. All right. And then we'll end with kind of a feedback on the breakout session, as well as we really want you to think about, as you're exploring the TAM guide, what are your thoughts for how we can gain more value out of the TAM guide to make it more usable for you? So if you can share your thoughts on that, and then we'll have kind of an open discussion Q&A to close out. All right, so let's move to the next slide. So I'm assuming that almost all of you have had some exposure to the new TAM guide. It was made available to the community at the beginning of last year in digital mode and published by AASHTO last fall. It's available digitally as a PDF and in print. So there are multiple ways for you to get it and use it. Whether you're new to asset management, a seasonal practitioner, or an executive, this guide will help you further your understanding of TAM techniques and advanced TAM practices at your agency. So most importantly, you can get the guide today at the link tamguide.com. You're going to need it today for our quest, so I suggest you click on the link or type it in and get to it. The guide, move on to the next slide. The guide has multiple elements to help with resources for TAM. It has examples of where an agency has practiced the guidance to illustrate the concept. It has checklists and how-to guidance that are integrated to make it easy to walk through the steps in the guidance. Next, the framework is designed to work for a wide range of asset types and modes. And you see that the framework we're using on multiple activities like the research management workshop that some of you will participate in tomorrow. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Katie for the polls.
All right, we're going to start things off with 3 different Menti polls to get a feel for areas of the TAMP where you want to focus your attention and how familiar you are with the guide. So again, you just go to menti.com. You can open a separate browser and do that, or you can do it on your phone. Can we go back to the number, please? Thanks. All right, so just go to menti.com and you'll be asked to enter a code. And so enter the code 98669260. And the first question is, what are the areas of your TAMP where you need to make the greatest improvement? And if you're somebody that is not responsible for preparing a TAMP, we just ask you to think about an agency or based on your knowledge of the state of the practice, what areas do you think people will need the most work? So go ahead and rank your answers there. And Matt is showing us the live action display of what we're finding. You'll notice that each one of these are areas that are part of the responsibility for preparing your TAMP. So far it looks like the life cycle planning and the TAMP integration and implementation are at the top. Risk is right in there too. So Hyuna, I think that session on life cycle planning is going to be very popular.
Yeah. Well, and the next one on TAMP implementation, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
So you've got the top 2.
Mm-hmm.
All right, fantastic. Let's go on to our second poll. We're curious as to how many of you have actually looked at or read the TAM guide. Even if you haven't read it in full, you don't have to do that, but at least you've glanced through it, you've looked at some of the sections, you have some familiarity with content. Please answer yes to that. And it looks like we're getting more people, it looks like, have not read the guide or seen the guide. So this will be a great opportunity for you to get some familiarity with the guide and to see how it's organized. So that's very useful for us as we go into the breakouts. Excellent. Let's go to the third question. Just has to do with what chapters of the guide do you think are going to be most valuable to you? It looks like people are already entering their responses. We're seeing a lot of interest in the asset management strategy and planning aspects of that. Good, and some of them might not be obvious where things are located. For example, the chapter 4 on asset performance is managing an asset's performance, and so that would include the life cycle planning strategies and things like that, resource allocation, the financial planning portion, monitoring and adjusting your system over time. But clearly the strategy and planning seems to be the lead from these participants.
Mm-hmm.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you for that. And we'll keep filling out the polls if you haven't completed it. And when we're done with that, we'll include that in the material with the documentation for this webinar. All right, so now we're going to hear from Anne-Marie McDonald of Connecticut DOT, Philip Montoya of New Mexico DOT, and William Johnson of Colorado DOT. They're all the asset management leads for their states, and they're going to share with us some insights on how practitioners are using or plan to use the guide to support stronger TAM practices. All right, take it away, Anne-Marie.
Thanks, Gianna, and thanks for inviting me today to talk about some of the key aspects and things we're using the TAMP guide for right now. We're cited in Connecticut as under the organization and people and in the third chapter. And it's very interesting looking at the chapters because it gives you that perspective on different ways to do it. And also who to reach. We've reached out to other organizations in preparing for our 22 TAMP to see how they're doing it. We're ramping up, really looking at this next 22 TAMP. We want to grow and strengthen both in depth and in breadth. And at the same time, a lot of key people in key roles have been changing. So our structure through the Office of Engineering, we're really focused on state of good repair. Being in Connecticut, a lot of our infrastructure is really old, and we have asset stewards by design who are in the different functional areas, whether it's pavement, traffic, bridge. And that way we felt as if they stay close to all the technical aspects, but that yet they report on the network needs with us. And so we have been fortunate up to date to keep the same asset stewards. We had our first asset steward retire last week. We met with him the day before he retired, and he was sending me some pictures of some of his assets. So I love that passion, but we're onboarding new stewards as well as with additional assets that we're looking at. We refer them to the guide. Here's a good basis to start. At the same time, our group is both for transit, public transportation, and for highway. Our public transportation, we've been fortunate that Sharon has stayed with us through the years and is the lead on that. On the highway side, we had all new changes and new people. So especially with COVID, they could refer and come on board, and basically you're bringing them on board a moving car or a moving train, depending which TAMP you're working on. And they could become versed by reading through the TAMP guide. And what's been really great about that is there's so many different pieces to this that the members of my team, they had experience in some of these areas, but by them being fresh and looking at these different areas within the guide, when we have our team meetings, they're actually bringing things to my attention and saying, why do you do it that way? How could we do it better? And so that brings us to some of the things in the guide regarding the communication. A lot of the other states are doing fact sheets also, like Connecticut. This updating process, we're finding that even going back to the same asset stewards or with new managers or new staff, we really need to document everything. And so we have made a template. We're working with the fact sheets and how we say it and how we document it for the next round of the guide. We go to here, we see how other people have said it, and we can align and document that so that moving forward, there's no gaps. And likewise, on the risk mitigation and process improvements, those are areas that we keep continuing to learn and strengthen on. And for a lot of people, we also have working groups across the department. We have new members, and those are new things to them. So we've created different areas and for consideration. As civil engineers, typically people think about ribbon cutting at the end of the process. Is it complete? And so we're finding through the interviewing and talking to them, they may have taken steps, but they're not articulating those. So having these categories, referring to the guide, then we can document and put these things together to hopefully make our 22 TAMP much stronger. So that's a little glimpse of what we're doing in Connecticut. I'll turn it back over. I look forward to hear about New Mexico and Colorado. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Philip from New Mexico. Philip, we can't hear. Okay, now we can hear you. Yep.
Good afternoon, everybody. I think it is. So New Mexico's been working on improving our TAMP abilities for our TAMP development and implementation and for the consistency review process. Last year, we piloted the development of a tool that would improve our asset condition forecast by taking program projects and estimating how these projects improved our bridge and pavement condition. And the pilot tool we used was just based off of Microsoft Excel. We also used our Aegis product, which we just launched 2 years ago. And that platform actually gets the data we needed to perform the analysis from bridge, from pavement, and other systems throughout the agency. We came up with ways to relate investments to asset condition, but found that there were too many missing elements to have reliable projections. So we're trying to enhance all of that as we go in order to make our upcoming TAMP a lot stronger. And since we have the methodology worked out, we would like to focus on getting the data we need and to motivate the units to generate the data so that we can use the information for our 2022 TAMP, which is quickly up and coming. We plan on using the Chapter 7 information and systems to guide us on data quality improvements. And we also plan on using the Chapter 3 organization and people to guide us on motivating NMDOT business units that produce the needed data to reliably provide us the required data. And with that, I'll pass it back to Yana.
Thanks, Philip. William Johnson from Colorado DOT.
Hey, thanks, Yana. I think I'm focused on one. I think it's a really cool function of the TAM guide. That's the checklist. And what I'll be talking about today is the financial plan checklist. And in doing so, I'm also going to give a plug for webinar number 4, which is May 13th, and webinar number 7, which is June 9th. Those are all aspects that are included within the financial plan. So make sure you tune into those. Why I like the checklist? Well, it's because for a while, people were asking, hey, isn't there just like a step-by-step that I could go through and figure out how do I do this thing? How do I develop it? Who do I need to talk to? To me, that's the power of the checklist that you have within the new TAM guide. Could you go to the next slide, please? In looking at those checklists, though, the way that Colorado approaches is to not just look at it from a very technical, I'm developing a document, I need some numbers, I need some analysis, but really we looked at this as who, in which step of this checklist do I need to include in developing my financial plan? And more so is as you do asset management planning, you develop your plan and you move towards implementation, understanding that those stakeholders are going to be the same groups that you use throughout the life cycle of your asset management plan. Looking just roughly here at my ingredients, I have no idea what we're cooking. Something with eggs and maybe a block brownies. Regardless, is when we're at this, you can look at the checklist as, yeah, there's these different components I have to go through. Some of them are more closely related to federal requirements than others. But if you just take one example here, like accounting and finance has pieces within identifying data sources. It has pieces within forecasting revenues and expenditures. And it absolutely has pieces within your investment strategies and asset values. But understanding this and using the checklist as a guide to who to map to in terms of user groups really assists with the buy-in and ownership and really helps you on the back end and implementation. So I know that was a little less than 5 minutes, Yana. I'm going to pass it back to you.
Thanks, William. Thanks, Philip, and thanks, Anne-Marie. It's really helpful to hear the experiences you've had and the plans you have for the TAM guide. All right, so now it's time for us to try a new element of the webinar series that I mentioned earlier. We're going to go into breakout rooms in smaller groups to work on an exercise to find what we need in the TAM guide. This is to help all of you, kind of open the book and get into the guide itself. So, and then we hope that that will make it easier for you to use the guide to support your TAM needs.
So the instructions for the quest are in the chat box, but they're also shown here on the slides. Each of the breakout groups is going to have the same assignment, and that assignment is to look at the 8 different topics that are listed on this slide. So you'll have about 5 minutes per topic to cover it and get into the guide. And the idea is that we want you to look at the topic and then find things within the guide that would help you answer that question and solve your quest. So the first one focuses on communicating the scope of the assets that are in your program and their condition. And for all of these questions, we want you to identify where in the guide would you go to get the best guidance on that particular topic. The second one has to do with improving your target setting capabilities for your pavement and bridge assets. Third, we're trying to get a better understanding and communicating the performance gap between how the assets perform in the future and where you are today. So we'd like you to go into the guide and see what you can find to help you better explain that performance gap. With number 4, we're focusing again on bridges and pavements, and we would like to improve the way that you're using your bridge and pavement management systems to apply it to life cycle planning and management techniques. So we'd like you to go into the guide and see where you can find some help with that. Number 5 focuses on risk. And in this case, we realized that you developed a risk register, but it really wasn't connected to your investment strategies. Sound familiar to anyone? So we'd like you to go into the guide and see if you can find some help on better linking those 2 components. In number 6, we'd like you to think about using the value of your assets. All of you were included a value for your assets in your TAMP, but how could you use that value as a performance measure to help drive decisions within your organization? So we want you to see if you can find some information in the guide to help with that. Number 7, we'd like to build scenarios of different performance outcomes based on how we're allocating funds to the programs. And William might have given us a heads up on an area in the TAMP where we might, or in the guide, where we might be able to find information on that. And the last one has to do with connecting your TAMP to other plans within the agency, the long range plan, maybe some of the other federally required plans like the freight and safety plans, also your STIP. Where in the guide could you get some guidance in those areas? So that's what we'll cover, and Hyana will explain the mechanics to you.
All right, so shortly when we go into the breakout mode, you're going to self-select your breakout group. So you're going to see a list where you get to choose which breakout group you go into. This, it's going to be random. We're all doing the exact same exercise. So a pop-up window will come up, and then you'll choose your breakout. I think next to the breakout might have the number of people who are in that group. So try to choose the group that has the lower number of people so that we can even out these groups. You'll have a facilitator in your session who'll guide you through the exercise and use screen sharing to work with you to reach the digital guide and find the resources and put the URL to those parts in the digital guide into a Google Sheet template where you're logging your findings. We suggest that you first plan how you're going to conduct the exercise and the time available. And Katie and I are going to be the judges, and we're going to look at the group that completed the most quests, the group that found the best resources, and then kind of looking at how many resources you found as well. When we return to the large group at the end of the breakouts, we're going to ask you to share your feedback on using the guide and what you think, what you find the most valuable about the guide, and some of your thoughts on how it can even be more valuable if things were done to make it more usable for you. And so make sure you download the assignment PDF. There's a link in the chat where you can go and see the assignment. That's good for you all to have so you can look at the step-by-step instructions. All right, so let's go into our breakouts. All right, well, I mean, so maybe we could just share a little bit how we got around it. In our group, I was in group 1. I was able to get to the site, and I could actually navigate using the menu at the top. And so you could get to see the chapters and the subsections and the subsections. So we kind of use that to move around. Where might we find the thing? And then we also used on the Explore TAM menu bar, the topics as a potential place. So I think in our group, people got a sense of, how, it's reasonably easy to navigate the digital guide. We just weren't able to see the results. So how about other groups?
In group 2, we were lucky at the very beginning. We were able to do a little bit of a demo of how the guide is laid out, the online guide is laid out, so that we could show some of the features of it. And then as we started playing with it, that's when we started running into the timeout errors. But I was fortunate I had a PDF version of the guide available. So then we just kind of used the table of content to look at what was in each of the chapters and where we might go. And we did a little bit of searching that way too with the PDF, but that's how we got around.
In group 3, we definitely had issues with the site timing out. We had PDF versions of the chapters, so we were able to muddle through it that way. And for some reason, Phil Montoya in New Mexico, he had no problem at all getting to the online guide.
Wow, that's interesting.
Maybe he was blocking the rest of us from getting to it.
He got in first. That's cool.
And I see that some other groups did fill out the worksheet. So what we could have been doing is just bringing up like Matt Hardy's sheet and just seeing what he was typing and then just copying.
Well, we were thinking about cutting and pasting from someone else's and just putting it in ours so it looked good.
Yeah, that would have been a good strategy.
In group 4, same struggles, but we had Meredith. So, my initial thought was for Meredith to flip through, find things, and then just show them to us in her webcam. But instead, we realized the download feature. So we went through strategy 4 as a group because that was a nice one that looked at different sections of chapter 4 or chapter 3 rather. And then folks kind of broke off, downloaded different chapters on their own, and we just kind of asked each other questions and talked about where to find things. Also looked at the different features like the checklists and the how-to guides and the case examples, and found a transit example because we had a transit rep in our group, which was fantastic. So it was just a good discussion since we couldn't do a lot of deep digging into the guide.
Group 5?
Yeah, group 5, before we got cut off, we were very successful. Harjeet was good at using the search engine, as you mentioned, the search engine. So he was able to very quickly pull up a few things. So that worked really well when we started searching for some of the keywords. So when we were in the digital guide, that was very beneficial. So yeah, that was the big lesson we sort of took out of that. But we managed to. I tried to search through PDFs and find the right things, but it left me longing for that to get back into that digital environment once I started dealing with books and PDFs.
Yeah. All right, group 6.
Group 6, we also had the same sort of challenges. I unfortunately had not downloaded copies myself, but luckily my team came prepared, and so they bailed me out. So we were able to use the PDF versions and navigate that. We did sort of introductions and talked a little bit about our different perspectives before even getting into it, which put us behind and last in the queue, I think, which is why we really struggled to use the digital tools. But nonetheless, I think we found them easy enough from the organization of the chapter titles to typically get, I think our one question that we found that we struggled with the most was the asset value, finding the asset value in without being able to search for asset
Mhm.
value.
Right.
So,
That
yeah.
one's not obvious where it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you guys all got to know each other. That was a benefit, right?
Yeah.
All right. Group 7. Were you 7, Will?
I was 6.
Who was
Yeah,
7?
I was over group 7, or was facilitating group 7. So yeah, very almost the same exact report as Will. I did not have the was not able to quickly find my copy of the PDF of the guide. Didn't have it downloaded, so we ran up against that brick wall. But I had a couple of other folks who had either grabbed digital copies or were able to had maybe done some searching on some of the topics before the site was became unresponsive, and so we were able to answer a few of the questions. Had some good conversation. A couple good questions came up as we were there, and we had Steve Gay in our breakout room, and so he was able to answer a couple of questions that folks brought up. So I think we ended up with a productive discussion, although we didn't we only achieved about half the quests. We tried the strategy of thinking, well, maybe if we start at the end, maybe we'll start at number 8 and see if we can not, if we're not all searching for the same thing as everyone else. But that didn't seem like it worked very well. So
well, we tried that too, so it was that was the problem.
Maybe everybody went.
yeah, next time start in the middle, maybe. I don't
know. Matt Hardy.
I mean, ditto what everybody else said. I think the one on the asset valuation probably was a little bit of the most challenging just by looking at the titles. But I brought up, the 2 points that I kind of brought up. Well, first off, we just talked about how you can access the information on the digital version, right? You have the different chapter headings and subheadings. And then you have the other tab that talks about topics, and you kind of access the information, in different ways, and just pointing that out to people. And then the second one is that we have a number of other sort of research projects that provide more depth to some of these different topics, right? So the guide provides a huge breadth of all the issues, the little diagram with the 6 boxes and stuff like that, huge breadth. And then we have other individual projects going into more depth. One of those being on asset valuation as an example, of that we're trying to just, add information to. The other thing that I'll just point out for the state DOT folks, we talked about the PDF version and everything and the free version. So tamguide.com is available for anyone. You can access the website itself. You have PDFs of the individual chapters that you can download and print off, which is what I think Meredith did and sort of others have access to. In addition to that, right, so the web-based version and the PDFs, we have sort of an official AASHTO publication version, similar to what we did for the last version. It's one single PDF as your traditional, AASHTO publication. We're not making hard copies available, but it's prepared in a way that if you want to go to a printer or something like that, if you just say print this PDF for me, it'll come out, like a regular printed file, a document. It's pretty thick. I can think around 400 pages or something like that. So that's the other version. So we have the AASHTO kind of, print version available as a PDF. And then we have the web-based version that includes the website plus individual chapter PDF files, other documents, checklists, and stuff like that. So if you're from a state DOT, you have free access to the AASHTO publication version. If you don't know how to access that, send me an email, mhardy@ashto.org, and I can tell you how to access that. If you're not from a state DOT, but want that sort of put together, published, printed type version, let me know, and I could do some magic kind of thing. But send me an email about that.
Yeah. So what do people think, though, in general? So we're going to have 7 more of these webinars focused on diving into the TAM guide. And so this is the the kind of model we're thinking of using. We'll get the digital guide working and accessible. So did people think the quest was a good way for everyone to get into it and understand it? All right, so Tourage says positive, so great. Other opinions? Thumbs up? Yes? Harjeet says, yep. Okay. All right, so so that part's good. Few quests. So Meredith, do you think that was too many quests? You can unmute and talk.
I told Meredith she had to complete all of them, so that might be why she thinks there's too many.
You said you have to do it in that time, Meredith. Get all 8 of them.
Well, and since she was the only one that had the book, it was up to
Right,
her
right.
to save the team. So, she had to take it on.
All right. Oh, Meredith has audio issues. Okay. So, yeah. So, part of this with the first one, we did have a lot of them because they were kind of general in nature. The next, set of all of the rest are very focused on a topic. And so maybe the fewer quests would be fine. I think we might get rid of the contest element. I think that adds a confusion that we don't need to have. What do you think? Facilitators?
I'm not driven by contests anymore. I'm too old for that.
I was going to say the exact same thing. I gave up contests a long time ago.
Okay.
It's a learning experience. I think we can all learn from it. Just go by that.
Like for me, because I do have a competitive nature. So then even though I felt the toggle between when Matt Hardy said, we should go through it all together. That's the best way to go through it. But then I get into my group and I'm like, let's divide and conquer, So.
Yeah, I felt that would have been the pressure if you really wanted to maximize your points or something. But talking to my team, we asked that exact question. Craig was in my group and we all agreed it'd be nicer just to get a slower start, but know who we're working with and then walk through it with more conversation rather than individual exploration.
Okay.
I did make you write down the last answer though in the last
He did.
seconds.
You were right there. We were like, let's get that last one done. So we got it in right.
Greg, you're not competitive, huh?
I think the breakout rooms though are, it's really nice with all the meetings we have to try different ways to get through all the stuff we have to do, so I'm giving you kudos for trying.
Yeah, well, we'll try it again next week. So all right, Matt, let's close it out.
All right. So let me, so thanks everybody for, again, as I mentioned at the very beginning, we're trying something a little bit different to kind of mix it up. I know that we've all been doing this sort of web-based online stuff for, over a year now, and we're probably all tired of it, but I think this is important. All the state DOTs starting next year have to do an updated TAMP. It varies depending on when your last TAMP was kind of approved. So it's going to, the latter half of 2022, all the states are going to have to develop there. So I think this is important and useful definitely for the state DOTs because they have to do this, but I think it's also just as good practice, just good business practice of having an asset management plan as somebody, an organization or an agency that just owns infrastructure. Having an asset management plan, knowing how you're going to manage your assets is just sort of critical. So hopefully people get value out of this. If you want to encourage others within your agency to participate, these are free. So anybody can sign up. So we have 7 more remaining. In general, these are happening on Wednesdays from 2 to 3 p.m. There was one, number 4 on there, improving TAM financial planning, which we had to shift to Thursday for a couple of reasons. So anyways, go ahead and sign up for them. Unfortunately, I got some requests that said, hey, can I just sign up once and get all 8 of these added to my calendar? I don't know how to do that. Zoom can't do that because this is not like a recurring meeting. Each one is a bit different. But I don't know if there's a service out there that you can do that in some way. I've been searching for it. If you have any thoughts or ideas, let me know. But I can't figure it out. So for right now, you have to sign up for each one of these sort of individually. And yeah, so again, to access the guide, tamguide.com. I put in the chat. If you're from an AASHTO member state DOT, you can access the print version free. If you still want a copy of it, the cost is $120 for members, $165 for non-members. And my email address is up there on the screen. It's in the chat pod. And I think that's about it. So on behalf of, I'm not sure if Steve's still on, Steve Gay.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, just one quick item for everyone. You know, when we did the little Menti poll earlier, it looked like about half the people had not been into the guide before. I think we all saw it was easy enough to get in. Then we had some overload issues. But I recommend before next week, try to go in there, look around, you know what next week's session's on, and it should make for some good, exciting dialogue. Back to you, Matt.
Yeah, think of this as your syllabus. I'm teaching a class this semester on transportation planning. So your read ahead, your reading assignment for the week is to read the chapter on life cycle planning and management. Please do that. And with that, we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Thanks, Steve, for being a great partner. Thanks to SpyPond and Katie and the team for putting this together. And with that, have a good day. We'll see y'all later.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.